Are we starting now?
Yes.
Oh.
Hi everyone, it's Icaro, your therapist. I just want to start by saying that I sit in a throne of lies. I say that because if you heard my very first episode, at the end of it, I talked about how I want to release this podcast every 2 weeks and alternate between solo and interview episode. However, I really got a beautiful feedback, people wanting more. People want more frequent. So we're going to go every week. So now this podcast is going to be weekly. Every Tuesday, a new episode will be released. So I'm super excited, and I hope you are as well. And I am incredibly excited also because today it's our very first interview episode. And I'm super excited because I'm talking to Kallie Klug, who's an incredible yoga teacher. She is trauma sensitive. She is a shadow worker informed yoga teacher. And from my perspective, I don't think we find those every day. Also, I had a huge privilege of being a guest in her podcast. It's called Your Own Medicine. So go check it out. Go follow it. The link is below in the description, in the show description. And I had the privilege of being her guest twice. So of course, Kallie Klug had to be my very first interview. So without further ado, here is our conversation with Kallie Klug. Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be on here. Like you're, you've had me on your podcast like twice already. And it's just been great. And this idea of, I don't know, I do love podcasts. I've always been a fan. And this idea has been swirling around in my head for like a few years. And finally seeing you do it and getting inspired by it, by you, just kind of like gave me more of a point of view. And I was like, okay, awesome. Maybe I'll just like get something going.
Yeah, that's kind of how it starts. You just got to like make some and then put it out there.
Actually, my first kind of question is about your podcast. Like, what's your point of view? What's your inspiration? And how did you arrive at the name that you did, which I love the name.
Oh, okay. Are we starting now?
Yes.
Oh, I said recording when I came in. Okay.
I tend to forget to press record. And that's fully my fault. I tend to forget. So I'm just like, let me do it right as I walk in and I'll just like cut the parts that make no sense.
Yeah. Okay. That's better than like doing a podcast and not pressing record.
I've done the class and fully did not. And I was like, that's awesome. And I remembered at the very end when the thing didn't pop up of like converting. And I'm like, oh. So I've been traumatized by my own incompetence.
Yeah, totally. I'd be traumatized as well. Okay, so I'm sorry. Can you say the question again? I'm so sorry.
No worries. So like, because you've had me on your podcast twice now.
Yeah.
And you are kind of an inspiration to me. So my question is, what was your inspiration to start? And how did you arrive at the name that you did?
Yeah. Okay, so I started the podcast because I too am a fan of podcasts. And I drive a lot and I don't like driving in general. So I like to listen to something and like, disassociate when I'm driving with a podcast. Or like when I clean, I'm not very good with silence. So I like to like be listening. And then on top of that, you're like learning new things as well.
True.
And so I remember I used to listen to Oprah's Super Soul Sundays. Have you heard those?
Yes.
They're so good.
They're so good.
So that kind of, what's that?
No, they're so good. Yeah.
They're so good. And I liked the conversation aspect too of like the back and forth and the like aha moments that, people had during the conversations. And so, yeah, that's kind of what made me want to start a podcast and just I don't know, these are like on a selfish level too. Like I'm really interested in what you do and with what my guests do. And so having a conversation for an hour, like of undivided attention is so valuable. And so that was a big part of it too.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the name, Your Own Medicine, it was from this yoga teacher I always used to practice with. She would always say, like, you're your own medicine, blah, blah, blah. And I think that just really stuck with me because, you know, we like a lot of times we look to gurus or like saviors for you know, like we look outside of ourselves for something when really it's like at the end of the day, it's like all of the answers and all of our medicine that we need is within us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love the name Your Own Medicine. That was also kind of an inspiration too, because I agree. Like immediately when you see it, I understood it. And I was like, cool, I see what I'm getting myself into. And very much like what you said, these conversations selfishly, right? They're for myself too. So I can absorb these aha golden nuggets of wisdom from other people. And I'm like, yes.
Yeah, it's like, it's very selfish and in like, not in a bad way, but it's like, you know, I've had like I think we did 1.5 hour episodes, but to have like 2-3 hours talking with you one-on-one about like something really specific, like that's so valuable, you know? So yeah. On the selfish note. Yeah.
So especially with social media nowadays, we're all like, we're kind of our own networks, because then my channel is on Instagram and then on YouTube, and then I have a channel on TikTok, and it's your attention can be divided. And then to have that one-on-one conversation is really awesome.
Yeah. And it's like straight to the good stuff too.
True. So speaking of the good stuff, I have some labels that I'm going to throw at you that I know about you. And then I want you to walk us through that. So I know you to be a yoga teacher and a breathwork facilitator. But I also know you to be like a trauma-informed yoga teacher. So first of all, let's go back a little bit. How did you arrive at yoga, and what does yoga mean to you?
Okay, so first of all, I just want to say I'm so excited to be answering these questions because like I haven't done interviews for so long now that I'm like, I want someone to interview me. So thank you for asking these. I'm like,
oh, you're welcome. I'm so happy that you're here.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so I found yoga. The first time I ever went to a yoga class, I was 13, and I was like, what the can I cuss?
Yes.
Like, what the fuck is this? I was like, why the hell do people do this? Like, this is torture. I left halfway through class and cried in the lobby because it was like hot yoga. And I was like, this is BS. Like, this is crazy stuff. And then years later, when I was in high school, severely depressed, severely anxious, all of those things, you know, that a lot of people experience before they find yoga. So I found this studio in my hometown, and it was just like a safe space. And I noticed that my anxiety levels, the days that I went to yoga, were a lot lower. And I know it wasn't just the exercise, because I had done exercise my whole life. It was like the meditation, the breathing, the community. So that was how I found yoga originally. And that's kind of been like the spirit that I want to bring to people as a teacher too. Like just that sense of peace and community and acceptance.
So what, because a lot of people remain just yoga practitioners. What made you take the leap into, what made you look around and go, I actually want to teach this?
Oh, that's a good question. I think I was so enamored by it. Like it was such a medicine to me that I like wanted to find out more and more about it. I did a solo trip to Asia in 2017 after I like had a big breakup, as we do, right? You go to Asia alone.
Got my heart broken. I'm gonna go halfway across.
Yeah.
Talk about dissociation.
Yeah, seriously. That's like a whole new level. But that trip was really like transformational for me. And there was this one, I would take a lot of walks out. I ended up in Australia with a friend in Sydney, and I would take a lot of walks by myself. And one time I was walking and I just like had this vision of me as a yoga teacher, like walking up to myself, and I like felt my own energy. And I was like, oh shit, okay, like, is that like a future thing? Am I gonna do this in the future? Because at that point I knew I just really enjoyed it. And then came the struggle of like realizing, oh, I really like this. I want to be a teacher of this, but I'm going to college for business and entrepreneurship. So how does that fit into that plan? And then that was kind of a whole different thing of like coming to terms with being a yoga teacher, even though that wasn't maybe like what my parents wanted, for example, you know? So
deviating from the path that's been laid out to you.
yes, exactly.
Are you still going to college to business, or did you get a degree, or how did that, is that still a part of your life?
Well, I got my degree in August, so
congratulations.
Thank you, self, for pushing through that. I got my degree, my bachelor's, in international business and entrepreneurship. So I feel like I still use that every day because it's entrepreneurship is like, you know, what I do now. But yeah, it was definitely like people still ask me all the time, like, oh, that's so cool. Like, when are you gonna get a real job? You know,
do they
and
really
I'm like,
use those words?
Yeah, they'll use those words or something along the lines of that. And at first I would be like kind of offended because I'm like, bitch, this is my like career of choice.
This is a real job. Yeah.
Yeah. But now I get it. Like, you know, I just get it. So now I don't really get offended and I just go, yeah, well, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah. So. Respond with some sort of compassion, I guess, versus like.
Yeah. Because I probably would have asked that question 5 years ago too.
You mentioned that you deal with levels of anxiety, right? And some days are better than others.
Yeah.
Have you always been, I'm not sure how to maybe formulate this question.
Have I always been an anxious person?
Sorry?
Have I always been an anxious person?
Yeah. And how was that like walking through your childhood and your upbringing?
You're getting right in there, aren't you? I expected nothing less. Oh man. I think so. I definitely grew up in a household where it wasn't really like safe to express certain feelings. So I grew up as a people pleaser. I have a lot of those tendencies still. So I think that is why I have a lot of internalized anxiety. I'm more of like the fawn trauma response of, you know, like
say more. What does that mean?
What's that?
Say more. What does that mean?
Fawning. So from what I understand, fawning is a like sub response of freeze. So there's fight, flight, or freeze as a trauma response. So fight obviously is self-explanatory. Freeze, or sorry, what's the other? Fight, flight. Flight, you want to leave the situation. And then freeze, you freeze up and, you know, can't really take action, or you like can't talk, or and so fawning is a subcategory, from what I understand, of the freeze response. So you can't like do anything, right? So you're like stuck in your body, you're stuck where you are. And so to kind of help yourself survive, you know, in quotations, or survive the situation best you can, you fawn to other people. So you'll be like super nice to people that maybe aren't as nice to you or don't deserve it. And it's in a way to like tell them like, I'm not a threat. You don't need to hurt me. But what it does is it betrays yourself because you don't really like that person. You're just being really nice to them. So they won't like bully you or get mad at you or whatever. So that's how I function.
Because your anxiety is almost showing them as a threat to your system.
Yeah. So I think like the lack of, because whenever we experience like the fight or flight response, it's like assertive adrenaline. So I think after so many years of like internalizing that adrenaline and not like expressing it in any way other than like everything's fine, like I think that was a huge source of my anxiety. And I'm still like dealing with that every day. But the more I open my throat chakra and heal that, the
Mhm.
better my anxiety gets, for sure.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you always had, fully putting a label on it, but
Yeah.
I'm seeing, the breath work and I'm seeing yoga as holistic approaches to anxiety management. Have you always had that holistic lens?
Yes, because my mom is a holistic wellness coach.
Mm,
So the idea of using medication to like medicate any kind of anxiety or depression was never an option, which is not necessarily a good thing, I would say. It was not even considered, you know?
mm.
So yes, I think I have always been like that. Um, but I don't know if that's necessarily like a good or bad thing. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, at some point we kind of just accept like as it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we walked through your yoga kind of approach and becoming a teacher. Now, adding on that extra label of trauma informed yoga teacher, what did that mean to you? How did you arrive at that?
Yeah. So I'm actually not certified as trauma informed
Okay.
because that's like a whole course. So I think maybe I
Oh,
would be more like trauma mindful because
okay.
I've done a lot of research, like so much research, just out of my own like pleasure, out of how trauma works and how it affects the nervous system and like how it manifests in yoga and how to facilitate a helpful yoga class and not a harmful one for trauma survivors. So I'm not certified in trauma. I think there's a difference between trauma. Yeah, so trauma informed, I think you need the certification. I could call myself trauma sensitive, I
Mm.
think. That's when you don't need the certification or you don't have it.
And how did you see it in your journey, the your students having that trauma manifest in classes?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think it manifests differently for everyone because we all have different trauma responses. Like some people, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm a freeze response person.
Hmm.
So like for example, if I receive maybe like now it might be different, but in the past, if I've received a yoga assist, that makes me triggered or makes like I'm
Like if
really out.
somebody touches you when they're
Yeah.
trying to align you.
Yeah. So like
Mhm.
I'm really outspoken about the whole like giving bad hands-on yoga assists because I've had some bad ones before and they can be really harmful.
Mm,
So like if someone touches me in a way that's like, oh, I don't like that, I would go inwards and like probably freeze up and not say anything. That's the thing too. People are like, just tell me if it hurts. It's like, well, that's people aren't always able to do that in the moment, you know?
that's true.
And so like I go in, I freeze, I probably stop breathing a little bit, um, get tense. And then for the next couple of minutes or even perhaps the rest of the class, I would disassociate because I was uncomfortable. So other trauma responses like fight might be like, hey, what are you doing? You know?
Yeah.
And then like flight could be like leaving the class.
Hmm.
And like those are easier to spot, but the freeze response, like for example, when I do hands-on assists, I always ask for consent and then I watch their breath. So if like I start to put my hands on the hips and I can tell they're like they stop breathing, I'm like, okay, that maybe their body's not ready for this, you
Mm.
know? So like that's one way, like, because it's hard to vocalize, like this makes me feel uncomfortable. So you're just watching the breath is like a huge part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that your words of trauma sensitive, I think, are the perfect ones because
Yeah.
I don't think everyone is that sensitive to watch someone's breath. Let me look at your rib cage or your belly and see how it's shifting. It's a subtle shift, and for you to have that awareness onto others, that's pretty incredible as a yoga teacher, I think.
Yeah, I wish like I mean obviously everyone thinks their way is the best way. So I I wish more
Everyone's a good driver, yeah.
yeah, right. So like obviously I really like this approach because I think if you do it any other way, people can sometimes get harmed and that's like the opposite of what the purpose of yoga is, but I know that, there's other approaches. as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
You and I have something in common where, I mean, I'm also, and I'm not a yoga teacher, but I am a yoga enthusiast. I do like going to classes and all that. But you and I also go to therapy.
Yes.
Right? We've talked about that on your podcast too. Had you always been open to it, or was it something you had to perhaps unlearn before you stepped into it? I guess my question is, well, what was your journey into therapy?
Oh my gosh, you're asking really good questions, Icaro.
Thanks.
Um,
You don't have to answer any of them if you're not comfortable.
right. I know, I'm just trying to think because it's like you're asking questions that are like so big, and I'm like, okay, how do we bring it down? Okay, actually, let's do this. So I always knew, like, it was always in my awareness, right? Because shadow work's like the stuff maybe you don't recognize yet. But in my awareness, I'd always been aware that I had experienced a lot of bullying in school. So that was something I was like, I knew that was like a story that I told myself, like, okay, I've experienced a lot of bullying. My breath always gets shallow when I talk about this. Okay. So as I started to get into yoga, there would be certain classes where I'd be like in pigeon pose or all these things. And you've probably heard the phrase like your tissues have issues. So sometimes like in some of these poses, I would start crying, and like sometimes a thought would pop up of like an interaction that happened like a long time ago. And I think I still have more work to do because I still get my breath
You
still goes
definitely
crazy.
do, yeah.
Yeah. And so I kind of like after years of yoga and these things like coming up, I was like, okay, I think like I need to have therapy for these things because like yoga's great, but I was like, I need something like a little higher dose, in terms of like holistic medicine. And I read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, which is so good. I recommend that. Yeah. And it talks about EMDR therapy, which is it's like a somatic kind of therapy. So it's like talk therapy. And then at some point in the session, you're either moving the eyes back and forth or you're holding two buzzers, like one in each hand, and it goes. So it involves the body on a somatic experience as you really relive these traumatic events.
Oh, wow.
And the idea is that it files that traumatic event from a trauma into just like a regular event, like in the file cabinets of the brain. That's what EMDR does. And I guess trauma work in general. So I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And that's a therapy that I ended up doing, was EMDR.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I guess the obvious question is, have you seen a transformation like from yourself? And when did you start?
So I'm actually not currently doing it anymore. Because with the program I did, you do like a tract.
Okay.
So I did a tract for like the bullying, and then I did a tract for more like home life. And that was from like February of 2020 to I think like early 2021. So it's like almost a year or just over a year. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Has that shifted the way you teach yoga?
Yeah, I think it's changed everything for me because, like trauma guides our life subconsciously, completely, like 100%. Like I heard something the other day, like we subconsciously try to create in our adult life the life we never had as a kid, like that we wanted, and we'll do like anything. Like we don't know that we're doing it.
Yeah.
But we'll like stop at nothing. That's why like people like self-sabotage and like do crazy shit that they like can't explain why they did that, because it's like we're trying to just find safety. And so yeah, I think like finding the drivers to a lot of my desires was really transformational. and like just in all my relationships, like some of them I've had to let go, which has been really healthy. And then the ones I've decided to keep in my life have gotten a lot healthier because I'm able to like understand, okay, I'm triggered right now because of this situation, that shadow work, right? I said it started with like the bullying, but then all this other shit came up as it does. And then so yeah, it's been a huge period of readjustment, but it's been really good. Yeah.
I love that. It really sounds like from just hearing your story that you've kind of always had this courage to ask the questions and this kind of awareness of seeing from other people and how they respond, and also how you respond to certain situations, especially how your breath is. Even when I asked you the question of stepping into therapy and stuff, you kind of stopped and it's like, oh, my breath gets shallow. That's your vocabulary. Where do you think that courage to ask the deeper questions comes from?
I love you. Thank you for saying that.
I love you too.
Yeah. I think just like feeling super lost and lonely as a kid and into my like late teens and early 20s, and just being like, this is not it. Like it's got to be better than this. Just like a really desperate desire to like find peace, essentially. Yeah.
That is the driver, right?
That's the driver. That'll do it.
So to go to your other label, right? We talked about the label of yoga teacher and trauma sensitive yoga teacher. How did breath work come into your life?
I was trained in breathwork in India. So like when I did my 200, I was trained in some breathwork. But it wasn't until, so have you seen Survivor?
The TV show?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know of it.
Okay. So there's this one girl on there named Parvati, and she's named after an Indian goddess, which I think is really cool.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. So she's like a freaking badass. And like in quarantine, I got really into Survivor, and I was like, this bitch is freaking crazy, because everyone on the island has their like low moment and they like unravel and they have a breakdown because they're like, I would too. I'd have a breakdown on day 2. And she was always so mentally strong and so like, and I was like, how does she do this? Like, it's crazy. And then I found out, oh, she practices Kundalini yoga, which has a lot to do with breath work. So I took a course from her like this last summer, so summer of 2021, and I was like, oh my gosh, like the stuff she taught was like so powerful, and I'm like, I will do anything you say because I've seen you in action and like I trust your methods. And I started practicing those things like every day, and I just started to notice like, wow, my anxiety levels are way down. I feel so much more confident. Just like everything. Yeah, I mean, it regulates your nervous system, so you just feel better, you know?
Yeah. When I started my meditation journey, a lot of things, something I would hear a lot is come back to the breath, right? Or feel your breath. And for somebody like me who doesn't really sit still for too long,
It's hard.
and also I never really understood what that meant. Of like, what do you mean feel my breath? Like I'm breathing right now. What do you mean? I know, but it sounds like breath work takes that to like a whole new level.
Yeah, I think breath work's actually like you said that you have a hard time sitting still for very long. So do I. Like I'm like type A, which now I'm pretty sure just means a certain kind of trauma, like a certain kind of anxiety. When people are like, oh, I'm type A, I'm like, well, you probably have perfectionist anxiety because I have that. But it's really good for people like that because it gives you a task, right? So you're not just like sitting watching your thoughts, you're like doing a breath, and normally they're kind of laborious, so you're working on like mental strength. And at the end of it, because your nervous system is regulated so well, then you're able to sit for a few minutes and like enjoy the meditation because you're like your mind is more calm, you know? That's why it works for me, because I'm not a good meditator.
Interesting. It's kind of like almost like a workout for the mind, right?
Yeah, totally.
Stronger, whatever a mind or strong mind means to people.
Yeah.
Um, you're pretty young, and you're a pretty young teacher. Are there like unique obstacles that you find in your career as a young yoga teacher?
Yeah, people are like kind of mean sometimes.
Are they really?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this. I taught a class. I don't really teach at studios anymore, but one time I taught at this studio, and this lady who now in hindsight, I'm like, okay, you were just projecting, but she was like, how old are you? You look like you're 12 years old. And I was like, wow, that's kind of mean. I think some people have like weird complexes with someone younger teaching them stuff. And so sometimes you run into that. But other than that, that's kind of it. Like that's just, and I'm just learning that's just projection. Like that's there, don't project your shit onto me, you know?
Sounds like ageism in reverse.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, like seeing, I guess someone who's young, what do they have to teach me? What kind of life experiences have they had that makes them qualified for this? And it's like, first of all, get to know me first before you put on these judgments. But we do make snap judgments, right? And you're taking the brunt of it, sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's kind of like a kick in the stomach.
That sucks.
Yeah. It's okay. I'll just get older. So
there you go. And more experience.
Not getting any younger. Exactly.
Walk me through your process of building a class. Because I'm assuming, right, from a yoga teacher's perspective, that you have to kind of like create a sequence, right, for all level students. Walk me through that process.
Yeah. So if I'm creating something for a group class, well, it's like different. For example, if I'm teaching a class like a vinyasa class, like your average yoga class that you think of when you think of like core power yoga, normally the sequencing is like peak posture. So you're like working towards a certain posture or like a certain like heart opening, which would be like back bending or like forward folding or hip opening, stuff like that. So you like sequence postures in a way where there's like a lot of back bends or a lot of forward folds or a lot of things to like open up certain parts of the body to prepare for certain postures. But if I'm doing like a gentle yoga class, that's more like functional. So it's like we'll do things for the joints and then we'll do some strengthening and then we'll do some mobility. It's not necessarily like we're going for dancer's pose and we're opening all these things up. And then for privates, it's like whatever that person wants that day. And I've kind of just learned to like show up at the private and be like, so how are you feeling? And then they tell me like kind of what they want that day. And then in that moment, I like make the flow. So that's
incredible. That's a skill right there.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've built. Because now I teach mostly private, so it's kind of something I'm used to. But yeah, at first I was like, oh my God, what are we going to do next?
You have this bank of poses in your head of like, okay, we're going to see what happens.
Yeah. Or like I'll have lists on my phone too of like different sequences that I can piece together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Do you practice yoga? Like what's your yoga experience?
I've been lucky enough, I think, where I've found like pretty good teachers. There was one this sentence she told me still sticks with me, where we were doing an aerial yoga class with the little hammock or something, and it was really fun. And there was a guy that was like amazing. He was super flexible and just like thin and gorgeous and doing all these awesome poses. And I'm like, of course your ego is like, I want to look like that too. But I was just doing my thing. I try not to watch too much. But something she said, it's like, oh, let's look in awe, not in envy. And that really stuck with me because I'm like, oh, you're right. Like, it is a bit of a choice in that moment. I can look and go, that's awesome. I want to aspire to be it and to kind of get better, because I'm very blessed with a very healthy body. I don't have any pain or issues or anything. So I can get there. but also I can also choose to be envious and go, fuck that guy. Like, how dare he be better than me? And it's like, whoa, bro, like maybe he's just more experienced than I am, and he's been doing it for a lot longer, right? And I'm somebody who I do like yoga, but I'm not really consistent at it. I have been more consistent at it with this yoga studio that's close to me. And I have a friend that we go together.
Oh, that helps.
It helps so much because there are mornings, I'm not gonna lie, especially now during the winter time, where Florida, I mean, I live in Florida, so it doesn't get like super cold,
I
but
heard it got cold there recently, though.
it did. So there has been a few days where it got like really cold, and I'm like, I don't want to leave my bed. I want to be a burrito in my bed,
Yeah.
just toasty and sleep for 20 hours. But I'm like, oh, my friend is going, and I've already made a commitment, and she thinks the same way. So we've been going more consistently. But when I was younger, I did take a few years of dance. So movement to me has always been interesting. Movement in dance, movement in yoga, stretching, kind of taking the body to its limits in some way and testing it out and seeing how much farther you can go. Of course, without injury.
Yeah.
Of course, I do try to not let my ego go like, I'm going to do this. And it's like, no, you can't yet, but let's get there slowly. So that's been my yoga experience.
That's so cool that you did dance. That's something I think I really like. And like, I want to get more into it too. Cause it's so like, it's just such a beautiful like expression,
Yeah,
different than yoga.
Yeah, kind of like yoga, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But less structured. Like yoga's so like tack.
Mm. I would agree with that. Because I think dance as an art form allows you to like, let's get weird with the body. And then as far as I know, yoga has a sequence of poses, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, it's hundreds of poses, but it's kind of like,
it's different. It's more like masculine, as weird as that sounds, because it's
really
like holding. I think so, because you're like, if you look at dance, like it's so like, not like if you do it, you're feminine, but it's like it is more feminine because you're like in a flow, right? In yoga, it's like most of the time you're like holding postures, and it's just a different vibe, right? If someone's like holding warrior two and then they like float down and like even the vinyasa is like structured, and anything that's structured is masculine, right? It's like a container. So dance is more like, I don't know, I think it's more like feminine and flowy, and I really admire that about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. So talking about that, do you have a vision or an idea of like the future of yoga?
Ooh.
If that is even a thing.
Yeah, I think, oh my gosh, when you said that, like all the controversies just like flashed before my eyes. Yeah, well, because there's a lot of, controversy in yoga about like, I don't like aloe yoga. They promote a certain kind of like image of what a yogi looks like. And most of the time it's like a skinny, blonde, white woman. And like, there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not very inclusive.
No.
So, yeah. So it's like, I think in the future, like yoga will be something that like ideal world is like not only practiced by more people and more body types and more like, races, even like they say a lot of races are excluded from yoga as well. So like, hopefully it becomes a practice that's for everyone, or where everyone can feel accepted and safe. And also more trauma informed, because like, it gets to the point where it's like hurtful if at this point, if it like I've witnessed some disasters myself just being a student in class. So more inclusive, more trauma informed is my perfect world.
I love that. I agree. Is there something that like for a new student or somebody who's like, oh, I'm not flexible enough, or talking about race, right? You're right. I think yoga, even though it does come from India, which we consider here in America people of color, right? But over there it's just them. So if you're somebody who's excluded, quote unquote, from yoga, is there something that you want to, what would be your advice? Something you want to tell us?
Yeah, I would say like there is a lot of teachers out there that don't practice these things. Like they don't practice trauma sensitivity and they don't practice inclusion, but there are a lot of teachers that do. So like seek out those teachers and like surround yourself with them, like for yourself, and also support them to like help promote their work and like their inclusivity. And that goes also to like the like physical abilities. Like you said, if someone's not like super flexible, like that's the same thing. Like most of the people that are preaching inclusivity for race and body type, like that, they also cover like physical ability. So I would say find those people and support them.
I like that because it sounds like you're coming from a very empowering place, trying to empower other people. I think one thing that we tend to forget very easily, just as people in general, that we get to vote with our choices, right? So let's say we do see a teacher that's being very exclusive, right? And they're like, no, I only teach this, and forgetting about the trauma, forgetting about disabilities and other, differently abled bodies and different races. It's like, it's not okay, but we don't have to go there. We don't have to subscribe to her or him. We can walk away and look for the ones that do promote that and be like, I'm going to put my vote here. I'm going to show up here. And then eventually things start to shift, because it's like, well, if this is not working, right? In this capitalistic society, we're driven by money. So and yoga as a business, right? If this model isn't working anymore, we're forced to shift.
No, it's true. I mean, even Alo has changed some of their, like 2 years ago, I did a marketing for a yoga department in a French sports company. And I was like using Alo as like to kind of compare, because they're like the leading, yoga clothing brand like in America. And a lot of their stuff was like skinny white contortionist, not even like yoga, like it goes beyond like hypermobile, all these things.
Oh wow.
And now they're different even from like 2 years ago. So it does change. And yeah, like I'm not a huge fan of the, like, I know this isn't very popular to say nowadays, but I'm not really a fan of the like victim mentality of like just complaining. Like, yes, I recognize that these things are not great, but I'm also like, you have the power to, like, Ashtanga, for example, is a really exclusive practice. Well, if you don't like Ashtanga and you don't like, then just don't go to an Ashtanga class. Like, go to a different teacher's class that like, modifies or whatever. So
you're somebody, because I see you on social media and I see you posting reels and little snippets of some of your classes and just giving advice on your social media. And you are somebody who is fully pro giving modifications.
Yeah. Because like when I came into yoga, like I told you, I cried my first yoga class. Like I couldn't even go like halfway to my toes. Like I came into yoga like a tin man. And so modifications were like my savior. Like I needed them. And now I just do modifications because I like modifying my yoga practice. And so yeah, I'm like super pro modification.
That's awesome. I am somebody who I do strive for being more flexible, because I don't know, I just like that in my body. But I'm somebody who modifies everything. I'm like always with a block or a strap or something.
I think it's like they say that that's the most advanced form of asana, because you're having to put aside your ego, because like that's the hardest thing, is to be like, okay, like to pick up a yoga prop in a yoga class, sometimes you have to be like, okay, this is what my body needs instead of my ego. And that's like really advanced yoga. That's what they say.
All right, that's cool.
So you're an advanced yogi.
That's awesome. My ego is happy to hear that, I guess.
Yeah, right. Catch 22.
So I guess some final questions that I have for you. How does I guess my first question is, do you have like some sort of spiritual practice?
Yeah. I guess my like spiritual practice would just be, I haven't been doing it lately, I'll admit, but in general, like a morning routine.
Mm-hmm.
So it is really like some breath work. I pull a card, like an oracle card. And then if I have something on my mind, I'll kind of like, because I really do believe like we have the answers in ourselves. And like when you're really quiet, that like knowing will come up. So if I have some kind of question or like need to set an intention for the day or need guidance on anything, I'll kind of like present that in the moment of peace after my breath work, and the answer kind of comes up. So I guess that's my connection with the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Would you classify yourself as like a spiritual yoga teacher? Or because my experience of just having different teachers is that some of them kind of have a more spiritual verbiage, and some, like, you can tell, are more like, let's work out.
Yeah.
And I like both. I'm here for it, but
Right.
I'm to hear your perspective.
I think I'm definitely more spiritual. I'm like a cynical spiritual person.
I like that.
Like like I believe in reincarnation and kind of new agey, but I'm like pretty cynical, like not cynical, skeptical. So which I think is, good to think critically about things. But so I'm more spiritual in my yoga classes, but it does depend on the audience. Like if I'm like right now I have a private client who's like, he's like a man who's like into sports, and he's just doing this for mobility. So I'm not like, we're just focusing on mobility exercises, and I'm not going to be like, inhale into your heart chakra, like da da da, because then you got to like read the room a little. But in general, like my preference is like on the spiritual side. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Is there some, I guess I've maybe already asked this question before, but is there an advice that you would give to, is there an advice that you give to your students that you just kind of like, you wish you could shake them up and go, I want you to get this?
Oh my gosh. I just thought of like 10 different things, and I just watched Love is Blind, so I have a lot of feelings right now. A lot of things I wish I could tell people and shake it into that. I think like the biggest thing is like if you want the benefits of a yoga practice, you have to do like something every day. So that doesn't mean like you have to do an hour yoga class every day. Like better to do 2 minutes of breath work every day than like 1 hour long yoga class a week. Like for sure. Like you'll see the benefits more with like 5 minutes of breath work or 2 minutes of breath work every morning than like one class on Sunday or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right.
I guess that goes for everything too, like brushing your teeth. Better 2 minutes a day than 30 minutes once a week.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
That'd be some spicy breath right there.
Yes, very spicy.
Except on Sundays, the Lord's Day.
Yeah, right. The Lord's Day, exactly. Fresh breath day.
Fresh breath. So what's something that people get wrong about you?
Oh, I don't know anymore. Like when I was younger, I was like very Christian, and I had like a certain kind of persona that I put out there. And so a lot of people would say like, oh, I expected you to be more like quiet or whatever. Now I don't know how people perceive me really, because I guess I don't care as much. Like, I don't know. Maybe they think I'm like, I don't know. People say, oh, this is one thing I've heard lately from my Instagram to Real Self Gap is people say, oh, I thought you'd be funnier in person.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, thanks.
Yeah.
They're like, you were so funny on your Instagram. I thought you'd be funnier in person. And I'm like, oh, okay. Thank you for that information.
That is the funny thing about, I love I love that verbiage that you said about the gap between social media life and real life, is that in real life, people think they're the best version of yourself at all times. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah. Like, it's so funny. It's like, I mean, I guess you inevitably get some kind of perception of someone, but I'm like, maybe don't verbalize certain things, like certain, like maybe you don't say, oh, I thought you'd be funnier, or I thought you'd be prettier, or, you know, certain things just like keep on the inside. It's okay. No, we don't need to hear all the opinions.
That's advice you have for the world. Keep it
Yeah, that's just for everyone listening.
So what's a memory that you have that always makes you smile?
Oh my gosh. I think just like a lot of moments with my boyfriend. He's amazing. Yeah. I mean, right now I'm thinking back. So when we had our interview last time, I had just gotten like a shot and I was really sick and I was having like bad body aches and I was like literally in a blanket and I was like cold and miserable. But talking to you is like being by a warm little fire. So that's what I'm thinking of right now. Is just like the last time I spoke with you was like very precious. So that's my final answer.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I remember that you told me you got the shot and I was like, are you okay? Do you want to reschedule? Because I did get the shot too. Not the same day, of course, but I had it before and I was like, I felt like crap.
Yeah.
I was like, do you want to reschedule? And you put on a brave face, I guess. And you're like, it's fine. Let's move on. Let's keep going. And I'm like, okay.
I'm glad we did too, because it was a really healing conversation.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It makes me happy. Thank you. You said you kind of pull an oracle card a day or something like that. Do you have a favorite card that when it comes out, you're like, oh yes?
I have one that like pisses me off. Can I share?
Okay. Go with that.
Get it? It's the anxiety card. Like I'll sometimes pull. I've shared this with you before. I'll pull it multiple times in it, like in a row, and I'm like, okay, universe, like I get it. I'm anxious right now. Like I would like some other help. And then I guess like my favorite card is the death card. Like whenever I pull that, I like know some shit's about to go down or some shit's going down. So yeah, the anxiety card and the death card.
Love and hate.
Yes.
And what's like a book, movie, quote, or song that you just love it so much you want to share with everybody?
I guess like the first thing that comes to mind is the phrase, like I said earlier, your tissues have issues. Like there's so much stuff. There's so much shit. Like we think that our trauma is just like, oh, in my mind, but the body remembers everything too. And like that'll dictate like your life if you don't figure that out. So I'm a huge advocate for trauma work, just like you are. And so, yeah, I guess your tissues have issues.
Awesome. And final question is, how can people connect with you?
So they can find me on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. Both of them are at Kallie Klug Yoga. So KALLIEKLUG Yoga. I'm on YouTube, same thing, Kallie Klug Yoga. If you're like on Facebook, which I never am, I do have a page on Facebook though.
Me too, but I'm never on there.
I'm never on there. Just in case Facebook is your jam. And yeah, you can email me as well at kallieklugyoga@gmail.com.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Kallie, that was awesome. Thank you so much for
My pleasure.
being a guest and for being on here.
Thanks for having me. You're a really good interviewer. Those are really good questions.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was like, oh shit, right? Like off to the races. So those had me stumped. Yeah, that was really good. Thank you for interviewing me. That was really special.
Thank you very much. And there you have it. That was our conversation with Kallie Klug. I hope you guys enjoyed it and had as much fun as I did talking to this incredible person. All of her links are in the show description, so you can totally go find her. The links are all there. And a few announcements before we leave. If you guys want to follow me, you can follow me on Instagram at Icaro Tarot. You can also join my Rainbow Temple membership. All the links are below. You can also find me on my YouTube channel. And if you want a more community-based interaction, you can, yes, join the Rainbow Temple, and also you can join my Discord, absolutely free. All right, guys, thank you all so much for joining me and just making this experience absolutely extra special. If you guys would be so kind, please leave a review, give a 5-star rating for the podcast. It helps the podcast reach as many people as possible, and it really helps our community, our therapist community, grow. And if you guys also want, please, when you leave me a review, leave me a joke. Leave me something interesting about yourself or what you like. I would love to share here. And we have our first joke. So Natasha sent to us in a review saying, "What do you call an alligator in a vest?" An investigator. Oh my God. It's so stupid. It's hilarious. Thank you so much, Natasha, for sending that in. I already have more jokes for next week, so please keep them coming. I'm excited to end episodes like this. So thank you all so much. Send you so much love, and I'll see you guys next week.